Good evening, wherever you are. Good morning. We're happy to have you all join us for this final panel in our Futures Forum this week, titled Next Horizons in Cybersecurity and Digital Threats in the Middle East. We have an exciting lineup of experts who are going to take us all over the world and all over the world of tech. And we have an excellent moderator who's going to join us, who I'm pleased to introduce. Dr. Amy Salehman is the founder and CEO of Prescient, a foresight consultancy that helps Fortune 500 firms, governments, and nonprofit organizations to anticipate and prepare for the future. She is also a professor of strategic foresight in the Culture, Communications, and Technology program at Georgetown University, and the founder and director of the Foresight Sandbox. This executive education program provides strategic foresight training to businesses and government leaders. Huffington Post called her one of the world's 7 top futurists in 2015, and Forbes cited her as one of the world's 50 leading female futurists in 2020. Dr. Salehman's previous roles include Chief Executive Officer and President of the World Future Society and the Chair of Information Integration at the U.S. National War College. She earned her doctorate from the Department of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at New York University. I'm excited to hear what all of our panelists will discuss today, and very, very pleased to introduce Dr. Salehman. Please take it away.
Thanks so much. Welcome everyone to our final event for the Middle East Institute's inaugural Futures Forum. It's been an incredible 4 days if you've been here for all of them discussing important topics, and this one will be no different. We are very excited to be joined by 3 cyber experts, and they are exceptional people for our final discussion on the future of cybersecurity and cyber war. Let me introduce them. Our first panelist is Professor Mohamed Khan, who is a global thought leader and influencer in cybersecurity. He is the founder and CEO of the Global Foundation for Cyber Studies and Research, which is an independent and nonpartisan cybersecurity think tank based in Washington, D.C. Our second panelist is Chris Kubeka. Chris is the founder and CEO of HypaSec, as well as the Distinguished Chair for Middle East Institute's Cyber Program. Kubeka has been listed as one of the top 50 women in cybersecurity for the United Kingdom. Our final panelist, last but not least to be cited, is Mohamed Salehman. Mohamed is a non-resident scholar with MEI's Cyber Program and Egypt Program, and a senior associate at McLarty Associates Middle East and North Africa practice. His work focuses on the intersection of technology, geopolitics, and business in the Middle East and North Africa. And you can be sure that that is only skimming the surface of each of their biographies. If you have any questions, turning now briefly to logistics throughout the conversation, please write them in the Q&A space at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Or in the chat space, but we will try to stick with the Q&A space. Or alternatively, if those are not available, you can email your question to events@mei.edu. We're going to start with one question to each of our panelists, the same question. We know that this conference is dedicated above all to trying to get to the future and the different future of the Middle East. It's probably not an exaggeration to say that the Middle East is a region that has almost never been thought of as a place that not only can, but does change. There are few commentators that don't remark on the fact that there are thousands of years of history predating event or the tradition-laden ways of its people, and we're here to sort of brush all that away and note, of course, that the Middle East is part of our fast world, and everyone there, like here, is living in 2021. So my first question for each of our panelists is, what, in your view, is the most important way that cybersecurity or the cyber politics of the Middle East will be demonstrably different in 2031, in 2030, as compared to today? So let's start in the future and we'll work our way back. Mohamed Khan, perhaps we could start with you.
Thanks, Amy, for the nice introduction. First of all, I would like to extend my heartiest congratulations to the Middle East Institute on 75th anniversary and to organize this overwhelming forum of strategic importance for MENA region. I indeed feel honored and privileged to be part of this outstanding panel along with distinguished and eminent scholars. So let me start off with shedding some light on cybersecurity in the Middle East, which is getting significant importance, whether we consider it in socioeconomics, geopolitics, or even in national security context. And as we know that the MENA region is witnessing a fast-paced digital transformation, and almost all the countries have their own vision to become a digital economy. And in parallel, the region is also experiencing an exponential digital penetration with phenomenal investments in smart cities, fourth industrial revolution, and even some emerging realities, for example, 5G, blockchain, Internet of Things, AI, and so on. Unfortunately, the region from time to time has been experiencing cyber incidents in terms of advanced persistent threats, espionage, DDoS, and ransomware attacks. But due to the regional geopolitics, cyber and hacking operations are becoming more organized and potentially more devastating in frequency and sophistication. And over the last decade, we have actually witnessed new tactics, techniques, and procedures, along with complex attack vectors that seems to increase in sophistication and magnitude in the upcoming future. Hence, the grave challenge is how to deal with this all, and how to have enough human capital or capacity to be resilient in building new capabilities and technologies. Having said that, we know that the challenges are in abundance, which are common with the rest of the world. But MENA has a great opportunity as far as its human capital is concerned. Actually, the region is home to a staggering 300 million tech-savvy young people. That is one of the highest young populations in the world, with a median age of approximately 27 years old. So with this, comes a great responsibility for the regional governments and policymakers to leverage this human capital, which could become a great source of innovation, creativity, and aspiration in cybersecurity. On the other hand, the world is facing a phenomenal shortage of cybersecurity professionals, which will continue to increase over the next many years. So the regional countries have a great opportunity to fill this gap, not only to meet their local demands, but to export skilled workforce to the global job market as well. So this is the same, for other emerging technologies when we talk about the blockchain, artificial intelligence, IoT, or drones, even the quantum computing, and so on. So to achieve this all, some countries in the region, including Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, have already established world-class, cybersecurity institutions and programs, because cybersecurity has become a part of their national security agenda. And if you look at cybersecurity and other emerging technologies from the Saudi lens, the leadership is paying paramount importance to education, research, outreach, and industrial perspectives in becoming a knowledge-based economy. So in the pursuit of Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia has taken a strong line on cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, and aims to become one of the top 5 countries globally, especially in AI, which is expected to create over 25,000 jobs locally before 2030 ends. And in addition to that, AI is also expected to contribute to 135 billion US dollars to the Saudi GDP by 2030, which is quite impressive. And government has a great vision and motivation to inject AI in all the departments, and they do all the automations gradually. And one important thing to mention is that Saudi Arabia has a keen attention to localize its defense industry from 5% to 50% over the next decade. And cybersecurity is a key area in this plan, which can create thousands of jobs, startups, and even the business opportunities in the kingdom. In addition to that, there are a couple of great initiatives through the diplomacy and international cooperation that would actually help the kingdom to have a strong footprint in the global cybersecurity agenda through the G20 or the United Nations. I think we can deep dive into it a little bit more later in this section. Thank you very much. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you. Let's keep going. Chris Kubeka, do you want to share your vision of what will be demonstrably different in the region in 2030?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that will be quite different in 2031 is cybersecurity will be part of the national policy of every government in the region. And with that, there will be regulations in certain markets and a look at privacy, because unfortunately, surveillance is increasing not only with governments, but with many marketing firms. Marketing firms have been replacing things like traditional military intelligence in the digital world. And if the region doesn't have some sort of general data protection regulations, they're actually missing out economically in a way that, for example, Europe and some of the US states are actually increasing some of their revenues and increasing some of their tax coffers. So I see that a GCC GDPR will be in place, and other countries will take a look at that and go, hey, wait a second, this means that Western countries can set up shop in my country. And obviously that's going to increase jobs and try to fill that gap of what do all the young people do in the region. Another thing that I see occurring is as automation becomes more and more mature, we're going to see, hopefully, a way that different types of machine learning will help fill some of the gaps for cybersecurity skills gap. And there are many beneficial reasons why that should come into place, because the more things like smart cities come into place, if cybersecurity isn't thought of or prepared for, it's just going to be another target for the geopolitics or for the regular everyday kind of cyber criminals. I also kind of have some apprehension about what will happen by 2031. And one of those is we've been looking at 5G, for example, as a bit of a war in tech dominance around the world. Will you go with the West or will you go with China? But 5G is now a bit old-fashioned when we think of 6E or 6G. Right now, China has that communications dominance in space, which is something that more Middle Eastern and Northern African countries are looking at going into or maturing in space with their space technologies. So which way will most of the region go? There was a scathing article by a now retired general in the US press last week saying that the reason why he resigned was because the US is unable to keep up with cybersecurity and other technological concerns, that they've fallen behind and China has, quote unquote, won the tech dominance war. So we have to think of, if that region has an opportunity to go with the US and the West, which might now be second best by 2031, and China, which might be the best by 2031, which way are they going to go? And I personally would say China, in that case, right? Because you want the best of the best. Another thing that I hope to see by 2031 is when we start talking about emerging technologies and cybersecurity and high-tech industry, that more governments like UAE did include women in the discussion and as part of their national defense and cybersecurity policy, because you cannot succeed as a country nowadays, as we're seeing more and more, without including half of your population into the mix. Saudi has been doing a very interesting job with that, where the country has been labeled the country with the most educated housewives, because women have a higher level of education on average than men in Saudi. And recently, luckily, a lot more jobs have been opening up. I myself, when I've been to Saudi, I've seen that the majority of programmers and developers are women, because it's a job that's now opened up. And it's a job that, quite frankly, we need a lot more people in. I've seen in the space industry in UAE, 80% of the engineers and technicians are women in the UAE Space Force. And these are two countries that are embracing high technology and trying to make a success of it, and they're succeeding. So I hope that the other countries will follow suit. So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you very much for the answer. Mohamed Salehman, again, not least, but share your thoughts with us, if you could, about the future of cybersecurity in the Middle East.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate the invite from MEI, and I appreciate that I'm on the same panel with Mohamed and Chris. Also, I think it's unfair. I'm trying to be smart after Cress and her thoughtfulness as usual. Amy, to your question, I think I have a couple of points to make about the future. I think my sentence is going to be accessibility. There is going to be cyber proliferation. Everyone is going to have access to cyber. This is not limited to big budget militaries, nation state actors. We're already seeing non-state actors having modest cyber capabilities right now, but this is going to change. We're speaking about non-traditional, non-state actors, hacktivists, different ethnic groups, resistant groups, rebel groups, political parties, is going to be part of everyday political dynamics in the region. It's hard for me to imagine how this is going to unfold specifically, but I believe that accessibility and proliferation is going to be a new norm, and we're going to see this in a few years. Second trend I see is cyber alliances. Between the nation states in the Middle East, there is an understanding that, or recognition, that we need some sort of alliances outside of the United States bilateral relation to address certain kind of regional problems. And cyber and tech is at the core of these kind of alliances. For example, we had the Abrahamic Accord, and again, there is a lot of geopolitical ramifications from the Abrahamic Accord. However, there is a cyber and tech component that exists, that you have two nations, Israel and the UAE, looking to each other from a comparative advantage standpoint. Israel is a cyber superpower when it comes to its own capabilities, the deep tech, but UAE is a huge market, accessibility to from the ASEAN to Middle East to Africa as an international hub, and can act as a scale-up nation for other tech companies. So you're going to see how this cyber alliances unfold. On the other hand, you have Iran working with China, its own cyber capabilities. So it's very interesting to see the cyber alliances and how they're going to emerge and evolve in the upcoming few years. My third point is, and Chris alluded to that, I believe cyber sovereignty approach is going to be, is the new norm, is going to be more in the future. And what I mean by cyber sovereignty, I mean data localization. There is that tendency that my data is in my house, my data is on my land. You cannot really transfer it overseas. It has to be processed inside. You have to have a local representative inland. This is an emerging trend, and I think this is going to continue for the coming few years. My fourth point, and also Chris alluded to that, the question of great power competition in tech. I believe you are going to see a very clear cyber divide in the Middle East. For me, I don't really believe in something called the Middle East. I believe in three sub-regions connected geographically: Gulf, Levant, and North Africa. These three sub-regions have their own characteristics, their own priorities. I believe the Gulf, because of a deep military and security partnership with the United States, it's very hard for me to see them going full on China. They're trying to diversify. They're cooperating with the Chinese because they have to. China is a global power, but there are some sort of limitations. This is not the case in North Africa. We're speaking about two strong US allies. Egypt and Morocco are in full cooperation with China when it comes to tech, smart grids, smart cities, electrical vehicles, drones, 5G, you name it, because this is what they need. It's low cost technology, and they don't really have that deep, they don't have any kind of military commitment not to do that kind of sort of collaboration with China. So this is when it comes to the Cold War. Again, I think the back to tech divide, I believe you're going to have the Gulf in a completely different stage when it comes to cyber capabilities, much more advanced because of money, location, and also governance. And then followed by North Africa, nation states there are trying to fill that divide. Is going to take more time. Levant, I think that this is a sub-region that's going to be somehow a little bit in the back because of geopolitics. I will stop there and happy to have a deeper dive later on in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the three of you have given us an extraordinary amount already to think about, and some emerging themes. And so I will ask a question or two, but encourage you, I think, at this point to just hold a discussion among yourselves and also the audience out there. If you are beginning to have questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A space, and we will address them depending on what they are, either as they come or at the end. So a few of the themes that are emerging that have been touched on by at least two of you have to do with human capital in the region, and particularly the question of women in the workforce, and maybe we'll start there, of geopolitics on a large scale, and in fact, your very interesting point at the end, Mohamed Salehman, that you actually see the region in different pieces, and perhaps the cyberization of national policies is encouraging that. But where are countries drawing their alliance lines? The third is localization of different industries, and perhaps especially defense industries. And the fourth, which seems to be the most uncertain, so it will of course be difficult to speak about because maybe there aren't settled ideas about it yet, but this point about everyday accessibility is one that perhaps we can return to because nobody has sort of an idea of what it could look like. So I'd love to return to that question with you, Mohamed, a little bit later on and say, well, what do you think are the ways this could look? But let's start with human capital, and maybe Mohamed Khan, we could return to you because I know that you are familiar with a couple of initiatives, but one of them designed specifically to bring women into the cybersecurity profession in Saudi Arabia. What do you see as the impact of this? And you may have some comments as well on what you think academic and research institutions should be doing to build a future talent pipeline, perhaps to feed women and others who have not been in the industry before into it, and also to promote the cybersecurity industry. You have given us a lot in terms of the resources that are in the region. And Chris, you may have comments around this as well. You may as well, of course, all of you, but pulling out who has spoken. So could you talk to us a little bit more about women in cybersecurity, Mohamed Khan?
Yeah, thanks, Amy, for the nice question. So actually empowering women in cybersecurity profession underpins the Saudi Vision 2030. If you talk about the context of Saudi Arabia, because the government plans to increase the percentage of women in the workforce from 22% to 30%. And this is a part of their strategy and national digital transformation plan they have. Therefore, this profession has a great opportunity for Saudi women to explore as a potential career, for them, because like Chris already mentioned that, we have a lot of women, and they are high tech and sitting in home, and they are more capable than men, and they have very good programming skills and mathematical skills in Saudi Arabia. So on the other hand, we have estimated that by 2025, there would be approximately 6 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally. So as per study, women in actually MENA region represent only 5% of the total cybersecurity workforce, which is quite alarming. And if you compare it with the Western world, in the US, I guess it is up to 25%, of the total workforce. So it's a very huge gap in between. So it is highly desirable to have gender diversity and inclusion in this profession if we want to have, half of the population and want to have the diversity and the ideas, because unfortunately the systems we are using mostly are built, by men, so half of the, you can say, the perception and the perspective of development in the softwares and the technologies have been ignored. So if we have, more diversified kind of, perspectives in the product development, software development, and technology development, then it would have more diversification, in the cyber arena. And I think universities, technical and vocational institutes in MENA region have to play a leading role in commencing academic training, certifications, and skills development programs to train women for the fastest growing profession, like I discussed earlier. And in addition, there is also a need to start entrepreneurship and financial support programs specific to women to establish their own startups and companies in taking the lead in this profession and making impact on society. So there is tremendous amount of, you can say, potential, not only in Saudi Arabia, in UAE and elsewhere. And we need to harness it, and we need to come up, support them so that they can come up with their own ideas, and they can, become the part of the community, and they can contribute to the, national and socioeconomic development of the countries. I hope this answers your question, Amy.
Very much. Thank you for providing additional thoughts. Are there comments otherwise? Additional comments, follow on?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say that, it's one of these things that we seem to forget, that I wish we didn't, but the first programmer in the world was a woman. And I named my company Hyposec after Hypatia, who worked at the Alexandria University in Egypt. And she is thought to also have built one of the first mechanical computers back in the day. So women have actually been the mothers, you could say, of this type of technology. But it was only kind of recently in some of our lifetimes that it shifted to being more male. Now, one of the things that women need, even in the West, is recognition that women have a place in technology. And they also need to see role models. And sometimes that can also force very small cultural changes of women can do this, women have been doing this, and women actually need to do this because fortunately or unfortunately, there's a lot of politics and geopolitics in the world. And as we become more and more dependent on technology, we have to then also realize that it affects all of us, men, women, children, governments. If we have clean water, if we have electricity, hopefully someone isn't attacking the electric grid, etc. And it also requires taking that kind of ownership and understanding that we all are here and we all have to understand to a certain extent technology. But I do see that if governments want to be successful as universities, et cetera, and getting more women in the field, they have to provide role models so that women can see, that person looks like me. She's like me. I too can do this. And we have a lot of role models that are male, but not as many that are female, unfortunately. I think that's one of the ways to empower women to go, you know what, if she can do it, I can do it. Because we just can't do it and fill that gap with only men. We have to do it with women as well, and also break through some of the biases that Mohamed had mentioned. When you have software and technology that is developed by men, there's going to be an inherent gender bias. So things are going to be, yet again, unfortunately, made for the male world. And we need to kind of break that and make it for the human world. And without women's input, especially in the Middle East, where they're embracing technology like crazy, we're just going to have a repeat of things that don't quite work for half the population.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing the story of Hypatia. It's so important, isn't it, to have revisionist narratives that share with us the history that helps us understand how we could get to the future. Of course, women were always there, weren't they? A question has come in from the audience that is in keeping with this discussion, and it is about the role of women in the peace and security agenda in cybersecurity. So is there any thought from any of the panelists about what is the role of women, but for our purposes, what could be, should be, or will be the role of women in a peace and security agenda in cybersecurity?
Yeah, do you want me to take this, Chris?
Well, I think that when we look at the policies of a country or region, we have to understand how technology can benefit everybody. And sometimes technology benefits a gender differently from another gender. If we think about how can, in a remote region, a mother access remote telemedicine when a child is very young, because kids just love to get sick when they're young and love to do things that can harm themselves because they get into everything, especially when they can walk. And how can we enable that so that women who are the primary caregivers can still access that information? How can we make sure that there is technology such as remote ways to send off various tests and things that women need when there's a shortage of doctors in the area? How can we ensure that there is the internet infrastructure to send certain types of tests and diagnostics to a bigger city for people to look at if you don't have that infrastructure? Women sometimes just need different types of medical care. And when we're taking a look at this, what are the needs of kind of everyone? And we need that input and things that people might not think about, such as without clean water, there's a rise in infection, certain types of infections in women that men don't experience. So making sure that somebody isn't able to hit the water facility and cause harm in that portion of the population. So looking at, like Mohamed had suggested, different types of alliances between countries as well can be very useful in the peace process, discussing that.
Thank you. Mohamed Khan, did you want to add to that answer?
Absolutely. This is a good question. Actually, let me give you an example of Saudi Arabia here. We usually organize capture the flag, CTF competitions. And you would be surprised to know that many of the, top positions are secured by the girls, and which is quite fantastic. So it's not the question that women can do it or cannot do it. They could, do it more better than, maybe other people. So it's just the, how we provide them the opportunities, and how we, like Chris has mentioned about the role models, and how we make new horizons for them to come forward and to do it. Because, in Saudi context, if you see that in the previous times, maybe many years before that, you would not find, women participating in the professions, for example, engineering or some other professions. Maybe they could become only top in all the professions, and they are showing that they could. This is just, we need to provide them more opportunities, and we need to encourage them to do something more. And defense and security is not only one subject. There are many subjects they could come forward and do the world more secure and resilient.
Yes, yes. You're both sharing ways in which really defense, security, and peace are very much intertwined issues, and the presence of women and the capacity to produce that presence is of the utmost. Let's turn, if we could, and maybe Mohamed Salehman, I could ask you to address a question that's come in from one of our listeners about this question of technology in daily life, which is perhaps one of the most surprising issues, because geopolitics between countries is so standard a conversation in the Middle East, right, traditionally in these sorts of forums. So the question from the listener is, as technology becomes more a part of daily life in the region, and they list health tech, IoT, transportation, and beyond, how can governments work to make sure this digital transformation is done securely and equitably? So you may have a story in your head already about that access, how that access is achieved, but is there a government role? And I would invite you to maybe discuss any other institutional roles that you think are critical in ensuring security and equitable access.
Thank you, Amy. Also, the question is very thoughtful and very hard to answer. I will pretend that I know what I'm saying, but I'm trying to think it out loud here. I don't believe that anyone knows what's the end point to what we're facing. What I mean by that, it's an agile, it's changing quickly. There is some sort of compound effect that geopolitics is tech, is social, is culture. And now we're going to put all of that in a time frame, 5, 7, 10 years, and see what this is going to evolve to. Because I think it's very unwise to make a clear prediction about what's the end point. However, what government should do is being agile. I think the problem when it comes to digital transformation is governments think in silos and also have preconceived ideas about how digital transformation is and should be. And this is where the problems start to evolve. What I mean by that, government has an idea that we're sovereign nations. Therefore, if there's a new medium, which is called space, called internet, called 5G, it also has to be sovereign. And then we're going to define that new medium based on our own traditional Westphalian definition of sovereignty and nation state. I'm not saying this is wrong, but I'm saying that these old definitions are creating problems when it comes to tech that's by own nature is transnational. From cloud computing to 5G to 6G to internet cables to Internet of Things, it's all based on the idea that we are all part of this global village and we need accessibility to the network. So I hope that the governments understand that there is not full openness, because I understand the other security perspectives that exist and security considerations, but you need to be agile. You need to have an open mind, about these sort of new emerging tech. Because what we're discussing today, in my mind, is all tech. We're discussing, like Chris said, we're discussing 5G, we're discussing IoT. I don't believe that this is the emerging tech anymore. Right now, it's a question about crypto. Is crypto money or not money, right? Is crypto should be regulated by SEC? Should be part of a center from the center government, center bank? Is it tech? These are very legitimate questions, and there is a difference between industry and government, as it should be. But these questions cannot be answered by the same traditional ways that defined us back in 1990s and even in the early 2000s. This is not a new Facebook, and this is not a new Google. You need to have a different toolbox that's based, first of all, on empowering, as my colleague said, have representation, and that representation has to be equitable across all the people, either gender, race, identity. You have to have that. This is a must, because to have an inclusive perspective. Second, you need to have young people, because I was born in the 1991, so I'm 30. Right now, when it comes to certain tech, I'm not really the cool kid anymore. I actually need my own brother, who is doing computer science at the age of 20. He's 21 year old now. He knows all of these tech. For me, it takes me a while to comprehend. So, because it's changing every day. So if you don't really have that specific demographic of thought leaders and engineers, you're going to have a problem, because people in the food chain, coming from different demographics, as they should be, because they have the experience, but they don't really know what they're dealing with. So this is my long spiel to this thoughtful, hard question.
Yeah, well, I'm probably not alone in really appreciating your humility in the face of dynamic change, right? It's so easy, perhaps, to make sort of statements about what could be done, should be done, but you are nudging us into a productive space. And I wonder whether Mohamed Khan or Chris, you wanted to follow up on any of that, because it's at the least about commentary on emerging technologies as opposed to ones that we are now quite used to, and the need to maybe shift not policy but paradigms that are significant, either geopolitical or conceptual.
Absolutely, and I think Mohammed made a very important point, is as did Mohammed, well, both Mohammeds, that the demographics in the Middle East and Northern African region is very young, and they are eager to embrace different types of technologies. There are accessibility issues, and I know The word infrastructure doesn't sound very sexy. It's difficult in many countries to sell infrastructure, but in order to enable learning, in order to enable remote work, which we now know is definitely possible due to the pandemic, internet infrastructure and everything that goes with that needs to be on the table and decided on and approved. But if the powers that be don't have enough input from the demographics that they need to, they won't understand how absolutely important it is that they have that accessibility. When major highways are built, there are usually only really good things that come out of that. It enables cities and towns to grow. It enables people and goods to get to work better, quicker, more efficient. And the same thing can happen with an increase in different types of internet accessibility. But we need the demographic that actually uses computers every day, whether it be actually who has a desktop anymore, on their smartphone, and understand that we have to have that connectivity to be able to do our jobs, to even be able to have this conversation. And it kind of, bumping heads against a lot of people in political positions where many of them may have never even used a computer. So they don't understand that urgency. So we need that input, especially since the population is so young and so eager and so dynamic and can do so much with the technology if they have internet access and other types of technology access.
You are all making it clear that there is a great opportunity that the youth and the education levels in some areas of what we're still calling the Middle East, at least for today, are an opportunity for the region and for the world, quite probably. I feel like I really can't moderate a panel right now without mentioning, we have to do a China question, don't we? Before we start to close down. So let's turn to the issue of sort of, big geopolitics as opposed to the human capital questions. You have all in different ways raised potential poles around which developments in the region might go. Chris, you started us off with Chinese current, at least emerging dominance in 6G and 6E realms. Could I maybe continue this conversation, ask Mohamed Khan, do you have comments on the role of China vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia, because that was actually taken off the table earlier in this conversation as a place that might not be interested in alliance with China. Have you got comments from your arena on simply relationships, shifting relationships, especially in the part of the Middle East that you focus on? Start there.
Absolutely. So this is a wonderful question. And coming back to the point of Chris, as she mentioned that we are having a transition from 5G to 6G. Even the 5G has not completely rolled out yet in many countries. And actually, just last year, we have published a policy brief on 5G and 6G, and we coined a term that is called G-war, because now we have a G-war between East and the West. So the G-war is actually going to create a disparity. How is that? Because some of the Western countries, like Five Eye, countries, and they have their own alliance, and they are influencing sub-Saharan African countries or the Middle East or maybe South Asian countries not to buy the technology from China, right? So if you buy the technology from the Western countries, if you buy a Cisco routers, for example, or any other router, which is going to cost you hefty amount of money. But if you are going, on the other hand, you are going to buy that same router from Huawei or some other, company, then it's going to cost you maybe 10% of the total cost. And then you are going to roll out 5G in those countries where we don't have access to the internet, sub-Saharan African or South Asian countries. And when you will have so expensive equipment, so it's mean that technology is going to become very expensive for the people. The internet 5G will be very expensive. So this is going to be a very big, problem. So we have to overcome this thing because you cannot sanction one country. So it's mean that we are going to create a human rights problem because we have access to the internet and to technology. Everybody has right. So this is a very important thing which we have to consider. And on the other hand, your question to the Saudi context, actually, Chinese technologies have a very strong footprint in the Middle East and elsewhere, which is, of course, because of the quality. We cannot say that, this is substandard quality or maybe the quality is very low. It is best quality we are using. I'm actually connected to a Huawei router, at the moment, 5G router. So I'm just communicating with you and maybe most of you people also. So it does not matter. So matter is that how it would impact the people around the world. Because if you will make it too complex, too complicated, and kind of bipolar, then, people will have a lot of problems, especially the third world countries will affect a lot. So this is my point, and I hope that it should be taken as a human rights problem, not as a problem of just maybe two nations fighting against each other. I hope this answers your question, Amy.
No, that's a very nice, once again, in keeping with this large kind of paradigmatic changes that perhaps we need, shifting from a purely geopolitical lens to human right lens might be useful. Let me ask my last question to Mohamed Salehman, and then I have one final question for all of you. And this comes from somebody listening. And it's about the three divisions that you mentioned, and you may or may not want to bring China into this. You referred when you spoke first to three divisions in the Middle East. And the questioner would like to know, what about the Levant? Where will it stand in the cyber world? And then they add, given its unending conflicts. So I think this is an interesting question. This is a great question, but because we are so easily focused on the more advanced, sort of high-tech countries, what to say about Syria, about today, about Lebanon, about Palestine or Israel-Palestine in its less developed arenas, perhaps Egypt, and so forth, Jordan, of course.
A disclaimer, this is my own assessment. I don't really represent an organization when it comes to this kind of assessment. So you have multiple characteristics between these subregions. Well, you have the Gulf, wealthy when it comes to oil, natural resources, and maritime, and is part of arguably a US security architecture. Not security commitments, but security architecture. So yes, they have a duality. Their biggest trade partner is China, but their security guarantor is the United States. So this is the Gulf. Much more advanced economically in terms also of tech and manpower and the kind of innovation that they can bring to their countries. And then you have North Africa, outside of Libya, and it's much more confined conflict than Syria. We have Egypt, Morocco are driving growth, not only in North Africa, but for the rest of Africa, because you have troubles in Nigeria, troubles in Ethiopia, some troubles in South Africa when it comes to economy and economic growth. Egypt and Morocco are trying to mobilize their own limited resources to catch up with the Gulf. This is the bottom line. And to catch up with the Gulf, you need to go with low cost, accessible tech that can help you with your own vision 2030, your own 2030 strategic planning when it comes to economic growth, digital transformation, tech inclusivity. And this is where the China component come in. And North Africa, first of all, it's not a region that's extremely important to the United States. It's important to Europe, but not really important to the United States. Maybe counterterrorism, maybe preventing non-state actors from taking over certain geographies, but it's less important than the Gulf. And that gives a caveat or space for Egypt and Morocco and Algeria to pivot and have much more flexibility when it comes to their own dealing with China and Chinese tech. So this is North Africa, stable countries, limited resources, looking to China as not only as a trade partner, but also tech partner, and to some extent security partner in the near future. And then you have the Levant. I think the Levant is the least advanced sub-region in the broader Middle East because of conflict. That's something that's not going away anytime soon. Syria, Iraq, the troubles that we're seeing in Lebanon, also the Israel-Palestine conflict. The sub-region is facing enormous amount of conflict that's consuming these communities in a way that it's hard for me to see them even making these kind of choices that the Gulf and North Africa are making. The whole idea of mobilizing resources, even like North Africa, is not even there in Levant. So they come at number 3. They have a very long path to recovery and tech transformation. And it's hard for me to predict how Levant will evolve from the point we're seeing right now. And I hope that this answers your question. I'm just trying to make sure I'm providing a framework to think about the region rather than giving you just a clear answer, yes or no, because this is not my way to think about this, about the region.
Yeah. No, nobody's here looking for clear yeses or nos. You are in the right panel. And of course, you know, I can't speak for any of you, but I would assume that if audience members want to find any of you, you will, you know, welcome their continuing dialogue with you if this didn't answer their question. So we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to give each of you the chance to share with us some closing remarks, and I'll suggest a question. There is one final question from an audience member that was about human capital and people power, manpower. So that has been covered quite a lot, but I thought I would share a part of her comment, which is thanking the organization for this important event. And it's been great to listen to these amazing panelists. And she adds, I am excited to experience the Football World Cup in 2022 in Qatar, which will be a great way to show the cyber capacity of the MENA region. So I share that just as her comment, because that's the sort of the mood that the final question will take. And that is this: what, for 3 or 4 minutes for each of you, or 2, in the cyber realm gives you hope or makes you excited about opportunities for progress in the region? You've given us a lot. I don't think this has been a hopeless conversation at all, but you may want to end on a note that is about progress and about where you see really good things happening that we should be paying attention to, or that governments or companies should be paying attention to and learning from or replicating. Thank you. Let's go in the other direction this time, shall we? Shall we start with Mohamed Salehman and work our way back to Mohamed Khan?
I love the questions from the audience. I think they're very, very thoughtful and very hard at the same time. You can start by the end of the question. I do believe that there is an understanding and recognition in the Gulf nations that the era of oil reliance is over. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in the upcoming 10 years, but Vision 2030 in Saudi, in UAE, in Qatar, even in the North Africa is a reflection of this fact. We need to mobilize our resources. We need to diversify our own economies. And if we want to diversify our economies, we need to transform ourselves not only into service-based economies, but knowledge economies. This is the slogans we're hearing and seeing in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Riyadh, and Doha. We want to be knowledge economies, and we're going to create the ecosystem laws and trying to mobilize our own resources towards that goal. So you're seeing 5G, you're seeing cyber trainings, cyber defenses, cooperation, cyber alliances. It's all moving to that direction. We need to leave the era of oil and gas, because this is an era that is going to fade away in the coming 10 to 20 to 25 years, and we need to be ready. Like what my colleague said, we have high percentage of youth, and this is going to create some difficulty in the future if we're not ready. So I'm hopeful. I do believe that in the Gulf there is the right, they have the right mindset, they have the right resources, and they're well positioned to do it. And I think there is a recognition that we need to do this right now, and they're acting quickly and fast. And that makes me very hopeful and very optimistic.
Fantastic, thank you. Chris, what gives you hope or is a sign of progress?
Yes, I watched this amazing presentation by Omar Sultan Al Alama, which was the UAE's artificial intelligence minister, the first in the world appointed in 2017, where he stated that he believed that the region had made a mistake outlawing the printing press in 1432, and they were going to make up for it. And they were going to be leaders in technology. And I firmly do believe that there is so much potential and so much appetite, and the speed at which the region, or at least the Gulf region, has been moving forward gives me a lot of hope and allows me to sleep a little bit at night thinking that one day I could retire because things are going to progress and things are going to be great in technology. Of course, there'll be bumps along the ways, but I see so much potential.
Fantastic answer, thank you. And Mohamed Khan, please close us out with your thoughts of hope.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amy. This question is very close to my heart. And from my perspective, I am quite optimistic for the MENA region to excel in the cyber and other emerging disciplines, including AI, blockchain, drones, and perhaps many other disruptive innovations. Actually, I'm saying it because of three main foundations of growth and sustainability that are willingness, talent, and resources. As far as willingness is concerned, as you know that governments in most of the MENA countries have a clear vision for socioeconomic diversification, as they are determined to become digital economies for the going far from the hydrocarbon-based background. And this is quite evident in the GCC especially, and maybe some other neighboring countries due to the phenomenal digital transformation. And frankly speaking, the willingness is actually the bidirectional. And the people also want to change and improve their quality of life. This is very, very fantastic. And they want to improve their well-being. So the willingness is the first step to embark on the journey of change and growth. And second is talent and human capital, which we have discussed a lot. Which is the change maker for this region actually, and we can capitalize the power of youth, and governments can provide them better education, certification, and training to nurture their skills demanded by the rapidly growing disciplines like we have discussed a lot. And the number third is resources and support. So I think there is no scarcity of resources or support when it comes to education, entrepreneurship, incubators, and maybe funding from different countries, especially like GCC. So the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the region is heating up, and breaking the ground with especially several high-tech and service-based unicorns that are churning based, coming out from the efforts of the young entrepreneurs in the region. So on the other hand, if you see the cybersecurity, which is becoming one of the very sweetest areas for VCs who are investing, a lot of funds. For example, just in the first half of 2021, there has been almost $11.5 billion injected into the startups of cybersecurity around the world, which is going to make an industry of almost $360 billion around the world. So I foresee potential, for the MENA region, especially for the innovators and entrepreneurs who can harness the opportunities and resources in building several high-tech unicorns in the region. Hope this answers your question, Amy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, all of you. We have come to the end of our time, and I want to thank our participants, Chris Kubeka, Mohamed Khan, and Mohamed Salehman for your participation. And now I will turn it over to Gerald Fierstein, the Vice President of the Middle East Institute, to truly close us out. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to our panel for a great conversation. I especially want to thank the MEI Director of the Futures Program, Steve Kenny, the programs team here at the Middle East Institute, and all of the panelists who've appeared over the course of this great week of conversations about the future of the Middle East in the whole range of subjects. I think that it has been really an extremely enlightening and hopeful week, and I hope that you feel the same way. In the first week, in the first day of our conversations, we covered the bases on the new economics that are developing in the region. We talked about central bank digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, and the possibility that they could be used in the future as a basis for payments. We talked about blockchain technology, and we noted that the importance of the demographic, and this is a theme that's come up over the entire course of these 4 days, the underage, under the age of 25 cohort who are underbanked and that are the future of the region. And finally, we talked about marrying the entrepreneurs in the region with the government, and we heard just now the importance of breaking down the government silos, and that was certainly a theme in our very first panel. In a second panel on economic diversification and workforce transformation, we talked about the oil industry and the fact that it is going to continue to be the backbone of economics for some time to come. But we also talked about the divides within the region, and again, a theme that we heard throughout this week of discussions, where we have some countries that are planning the next 100 years on Mars, versus others that are struggling to keep the electricity on in their own country. And noted that the region has a long way to go before it can really be looked at as a single unit. On the second day of the conversations, we talked about powering the future, and again, the movement away from the hydrocarbon-based economies of the past to turn to renewables. We talked about the potential for the region, really in terms of resource capacity, human capacity, and how it can win the space on the renewables, but also the challenges that we discussed on building the new energy systems that are going to try to keep up with a demand rate that's growing at a 5 or 10% per annum clip, and how much of a challenge that's going to be. We've also talked about solar and the potential in this region to really utilize this fantastic renewable capacity. When we came to the subject of climate change, we talked again about the hydrocarbon-driven future for the Middle East region. We talked about the impact chain on climate change, the need for recognition of the indirect impacts that climate change are having on the health and well-being of the populations in the region, on health, on livelihoods, across the board of the different sectors. While we recognize that fossil fuels aren't going away, we also talked about how a carbon trading platform is developing that's going to be perhaps the driving force of change in the movement away from hydrocarbons, and to recognize that solutions are going to be decentralized as we go forward. We had a wonderful conversation with Jonathan Pershing, who is the Deputy Special Envoy for Energy in the Biden administration, on the eve of COP26, the importance of what's going to be happening there. And Dr. Pershing told us that what we thought a decade or two ago that we wouldn't be seeing until mid-century is already happening now. It's 25 years early. The additional impacts on temperature rises globally have been substantial. And Dr. Pershing told us if we cannot urge those countries that have still to make decisions about their future climate trajectory to stand up, to step forward, and make those publicly and explicitly, I think the world is going to be on the wrong trajectory. On our third day, we turned to creating the human future. In our conversation about the future of cities, we heard the panelists talk about the next crisis in cities are the ones that we're not planning for. We talked about the fact that while mobile phones are universal in the region, internet access is not. And that data is not one of the aspects we're designing our cities on. Those are still focused largely on agriculture and resource bases. And then we also talked about the people who are living on the periphery of the cities, and how are we going to make sure that the messages that we're delivering are going to reach them. On education, we talked about the biggest challenge is reinventing education as a challenge of imagination. We talked about the case studies on alternate reality simulation that's going on now. And we heard the panelists say that one thing we've learned is that the preposterous is no longer preposterous. We had a fascinating conversation on the future of philanthropy, where we heard about philanthropy as being the neglected child of our capitalist system, where parts of the Middle East are often regard philanthropy with a measure of suspicion. And we heard about our duty and our obligation to make sure that we know where that money is going, and to really make sure that we reduce leakage of philanthropic money to zero. And then this morning, for our last two panels, we heard in our panel discussion on the advances of technology, the rise of autonomous weapon systems, drone sensors, space technology will be profoundly changing the tactics and strategies of conflict in the Middle East. We heard also that these technologies are democratizing the sources of operational advantage, as in potentially equalizing the playing field between states and radical groups. And then the panel that we've just been listening to with Amy and three wonderful discussants to talk about the human capital implications of cybersecurity, the localization, everyday accessibility issues, the role of gender, and particularly access of women to participation in cybersecurity issues. We heard again about the importance of breaking down the silos that governments operate in, and the recognition that we are all operating in a global village. And that the old traditional ways of discussing these issues aren't going to work anymore. And then we heard also about the importance of the demographics and a frank admission by our 30-year-old panelist that he's no longer at the cutting edge of change in the cyber world. So those are some of the wonderful discussions that we've had over these past 4 days. Again, I can't thank all of our panelists and discussants enough for the wonderful contributions that they've made. And most of all, I want to thank all of you in our audience for tuning in to these conversations, for being a part of the discussions. This is something that is going to be continuing on. We're looking forward in the Middle East Institute to maintaining our examination of these future strategies and technologies as we move into the future ourselves. I also want to remind everyone that all of the talks and the panel session videos have been recorded and can be found on the on-demand page, on this SWUGO page, as well as on MEI's YouTube channel. So, and to join the conversation on Twitter, please use the hashtag MEI Futures21. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for participating, and we hope